ate them and discarded some of the remains here. Now there may be portions of the field where we would find more if we dug down, but at the pace that we work, with a small crew like this, 6 people, working with brushes and picks, dental picks and teaspoons and so forth, it takes over a week just to do a 2 by 1 meter excavation unit if there's a lot of material on it. If you walk around the field up there, all the way back over there, over 50 or 60 acres of this area, you'll find artifacts on the surface. These numbers and letters have meaning that archaeologists all over the country will understand.
In the summer of 1980, archaeologists working on the western border of the state of Minnesota discovered bones, hundreds of bones. What were they? How did they come to be there? And how were they uncovered? The Canning family of Hendrum, Minnesota invited a team of archaeologists from Moorhead State University to spend some time excavating a portion of their fields to find some answers. They came for a look and stayed for 3 years under the direction of Dr. Michael McClovic, assistant professor of anthropology at the university.
The Red River Valley consists primarily of very thick and heavy clays. In especially dry seasons, this clay tends to crack open, and large fissures will open throughout the fields that we're standing in that the site is situated in. The result of this drying and cracking of these clays is that the land around the river tends to break away from the field. It slumps down toward the river, and as you can see in front of me here, there are some fairly dramatic scarps created as a result of this cracking and slumping. Much of the land below me was years ago, as recently in fact as 20 or 30 years ago, level with the field behind me. But the repeated droughts that occur every 10, 15, 20 years result in a subsidence of the land. One of the reasons that we chose to excavate this site at the Canning farm is because much of the field in which the site is situated is gradually falling into the Red River. Eventually, the entire site may be destroyed by this slumping action.
The second reason for excavating the site is that it was deeply buried and undisturbed. There are very few sites of this sort along the Red River. In fact, there are relatively few sites of this sort anywhere in the country. So we felt that a number of important questions about the prehistory of this region could be answered by going to the Canning site and conducting excavations there. As surprising as this may sound, the Canning site was discovered through standard operating procedures. During the course of archaeological survey in Norman County, we deep tested or dug deep holes in several of the sites which we were working, and in one of our routine tests we found the deep component at the Canning site. The deep component refers to the portion of the archaeological site that is buried under heavy sediments. It's about 3 feet below the surface. At this particular site there are 2 components, one on the surface of the field that is quite recent and another that is deeply buried, that is very ancient.
What many people don't realize is that when archaeologists excavate a site, they ruin it in the process. Digging and removing elements forever changes the physical record of the past. Therefore, each area of the dig is carefully mapped before it is disturbed. Before the dig began, the crew established their transit at an arbitrary datum point to which all areas could be correlated. The stakes lining the pit are placed in measured relation to that point.
How far is this thing off though right now?
Well, see, Kay can, I'll tell you what, go out, take a plumb bob and plumb down right to north 10, E0.
String up?
Hold the string up. Kay will zero in on the
Okay.
string. Somebody help Craig.
Get out of his shit.
No, not, but keep the plumb bob steady, okay? So that he can, no, he's going to go up there and he's going to plumb down to north 10 E0, and Kay's going to line up on grid north on that undisturbed stake.
Oh, okay.
No, that one's screwed up.
That's really messed up, Kay. Why don't you use that one up there, Bob? Go.
going to help.
Oh, okay. And then we'll need a tape too, and we'll have to bring it out. 6.25, I guess, would be pretty decent.
See, we're in this area and right in here.
Here, the crew uses the mapping grid and plumb bob to obtain precise measurements on the pit floor in relation to the surface
Take her up
stakes.
a little. Okay, drop her slowly.
It wasn't really slowly, was it?
Okay, that was 2020.
Yes. Okay, how about 2030?
What about 2040 instead? Okay, then 20 should be over in this corner right over here. Think go clear through slow. Okay, hold it up this little. It's not done.
It's real delicate around here.
What are you using to work with?
Butter knife.
Very delicate tool.
Yeah. When we came to the site, we had already tested it fairly thoroughly, and we knew that the top 3 feet, or about 80 to 90 centimeters, had no cultural material, no artifacts, no significant animal bones. And we decided that we would dig down to this bison bone bed with picks and shovels. So we removed the top 3 feet of the soil profile, and when we got down to about the depth that we knew these materials lay, we transferred to trowels, and with the trowel we pick off smaller portions of, or smaller bits of soil, and the point of the trowel provides us with a means of feeling whether or not any of the bones are underneath. When we feel the trowel hit into something, we'll clear the soil away from around the object, and in this case they're usually bones, and then we sometimes transfer to silver knives, spoons, pen knives, and even dental picks. Usually the dental picks and the brushes are used after the objects have been cleared of most of the heavy soil, and the finer tools are used to clean them off and to get them ready for photographing and mapping, after which they're removed from the ground.
As each item is removed from the excavation, be it bone fragment, spear point, soil sample, or stain, its location is carefully recorded, and the item is stored away in a cryptically marked bag.
The 21 in the site name refers to the position of the state of Minnesota in the alphabetical list of states. Minnesota comes 21st. NR are the initials for Norman County, which is the county within the state that this site is found. 9 is the number of this site in Norman County. It is the 9th discovered archaeological site in Norman County, Minnesota. There are a number of other details on an artifact bag that might be noted. We record on each artifact bag the location that the materials contained in the bag came from. For example, this bag is from an excavation unit 13 meters north and 4 meters west of our established arbitrary datum point. And the letters below it refer to the level from which the materials contained in the bag came. Level 9 refers to the level between 80 to 90 centimeters below the surface.
For years, the prehistory of the Red River Valley has been thought of as a non-prehistory, a time of non-occupation. Many people believed that the area was a buffer zone between the woodlands and the plains, long avoided for a number of ecological reasons. In consequence, most archaeologists felt that deep component sites in the region would be found more to the east and the west of the Red River, on the beach ridges of ancient Lake Agassiz. The findings at 21 NR9, however, are quickly proving to the contrary. Quickly, perhaps, but not without painstaking care.
All right, this process right here is known as screening, and basically what we do is we take all the excess dirt that we find or that we dig out from around the bones, and we put it through a 1/4-inch mesh screening here. And this allows us to pick up all the small bone fragments and small pieces of debitage or stone flakes that we may have missed while we were trawling through the material.
When we process in the future, we'll be able to...
As the crew dug deeper into the earth, they began to find more and more remnants of a past culture or an ancient life.
We found mostly buffalo bones in all shapes and sizes. A lot of the bones were identifiable pieces, like this distal humerus, or the lower part of the top of the front limb. But most of the bones that belonged to bison that we found at the site were broken into small pieces. This was because the people who lived there butchered them and extracted bone marrow from them, which they would eat. Sometimes the bones would be cooked into soup too. We know this from studies of the way Indian peoples in historic time used buffalo. In addition to the buffalo bones, we found the bones of a variety of other animals. We found bones of animals like beaver, skunk, ground squirrel, the red squirrel. We found a number of mouse skeletons. We found a wide variety of snails. 5 different families of snails are represented at this site. Our best indicators that people lived at the canning site come from the features that we found. Features are immovable objects and stains in the soil that are indications of some prehistoric human activity. We found what evidently were garbage pits and also fire hearths that had been worn out by weathering for hundreds and hundreds of years. Some of these features contained large rocks in them that are now broken and fragmented because of the hot fires that they once surrounded and because of the weathering that has taken place since then. And also at the site, artifacts. We found a variety of projectile points in archaeological parlance. What those are spear points. They are the armed tips of the spears that these people used to hunt the buffalo and other game animals. We also found hide scrapers, small stone tools that were usually attached to bone or wood shafts and used to soften hides so that they could be made into clothing or into shelters. And we found a wide variety of miscellaneous tools that might have functioned as knives or as chopping tools or as battering tools.
At the end of each day, the excavation is carefully prepared for exposure to the night air the bones haven't felt for 3,000 years.
One of the most interesting artifacts that we found was an ornament very similar to a barrette for a person's hair. It was a split beaver incisor, had holes drilled on either side, and the enamel on the incisor provides a sheen for the ornament that makes it appear as if it's been polished. One of the chronologically, one of the most interesting pieces that's been taken out of the site so far this season has been a projectile point, a spearhead that we refer to as an oxbow point. These points are Middle Archaic in age, that is sometime dating to sometime between 6,000 and 3,000 years ago. And I would like to continue work for the next week and a half trying to examine whether or not the site actually dates to this early oxbow period or whether the site is more recent in age. We have a number of radiocarbon dates. One of them is 4,300 years old. 3 of them are around 2,700 or 2,600 years old. And one of the aims of our project in the next 10 days will be to try to determine whether or not the site is over 4,000 years old or under 3,000 years old.
See the morphology, and then once you get the land data then.
Understanding the sedimentary history of Site 21NR9 is an additional method the team uses to track the time frame of the excavation. Doctors John Foss and James Richardson of North Dakota State University were called in to analyze the composition of the dig.
Do these charcoal lenses that you see, do they have, will you usually find that in an A horizon, or they could be roots? Anything like that, and might have to be found anywhere through the horizon.
I think you can find them anywhere. I found charcoal through any horizon, really.
Okay. And we'll run into those lenses all the way down, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, over towards this area. Okay. There's 4 major stages, I guess.
Probably the strongest stage is this one right here.
A visual examination of the walls of the pit indicates a number of sedimentary episodes occurred over the course of time. The walls are stratified or layered, with each layer representing a certain period in history. Foss and Richardson identify the compositions of the various layers, dividing them into horizons. Each episode appears to be represented by a buried A horizon or topsoil horizon. Some activity from the upper layers extends into the lower-lying horizons. This is believed to be a result of the area's strong cryogenic or freezing and thawing activity. The horizons are often differentiated by the color of the soils. Samples are compared to the Munsell color chart, a standard reference guide that breaks down colors according to their range of hue and intensity. The texture of the soil is another clue to its composition and developmental history. With Mike McClovick, Drs. Foss and Richardson check each layer to determine the varying amounts of clay, sand, and silt they contain.
Okay.
Okay, now this is that little transition zone from 30 to about 37.
Okay.
And one thing I would note about this is lax density.
We learned from studying the soils at this particular location that there were at least 3 different times when the land surface stabilized and plants and animals and certainly people might have lived at this location. In fact, we found evidence that people lived there at 2 different time horizons or soil horizons. The one that is uppermost in the soil profile, and then the one 3 feet deep where we found the ancient occupation at the canning site.
Which one did you find the bone in? About right here?
Yeah, 50.
The soil scientists take samples for further study. Then the pit is once again available for scrutiny by the archaeological team. After, that is, a short break for lunch.
Yeah. Oh, well. That's okay.
My feeling is that one of the most significant finds represented by the materials from the canning site is that the Red River Valley contains archaeological sites that are undisturbed and that are buried and that may be very ancient. And this is something that I don't believe we were aware of previously. Very many archaeologists had suggested to me that it was unlikely that sites would be found in any abundance in the interior of the Red River Valley. And furthermore, I had no idea that when this site was started, that we would come to understand that the Red River Valley is literally a layer cake of prehistoric times. That is, that there are archaeological sites layered in the river flood sediments all along the river. We began to suspect this as the materials from the Canning site came to light, and in the time since we began our excavations at the Canning site, we found that indeed this is the case, that there are other archaeological sites in this region that are buried, that are preserved, that are undisturbed.
Well, back to work.
The location of Site 21 NR9 near the border of the northeastern prairie and the forests of northwestern Minnesota is a critical factor in determining the lifestyle of the site's inhabitants.
This region we refer to as an ecotone, and here we have two great environments coming together, and in prehistoric time this was the transition zone between two culture spheres as well, the Plains culture area and the eastern woodlands culture area. And at the Canning site, what do we find? We find artifacts that are similar to artifacts that are very common in ancient sites in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, in the woodland areas of the Great Lakes region. But the kind of lifestyle that's represented at the Canning site is a lifestyle that's common throughout the plains for ages and ages, for thousands of years. In fact, for a period of time going back to the first immigration of human beings into the North American continent.
Nothing to it.
But making the discoveries, finding the artifacts, is not always easy. Not the stuff of instant gratification.
It's not the ornament. It's just the tooth. But the ornaments are in here. Okay.
After 3 summers' labor, the team began to draw some conclusions about what events had taken place at 21 NR9 3,000 years ago.
We learned something about the everyday life of people that used to live in the Red River Valley. We learned what kind of animals they hunted and how they butchered them and what season of the year they happened to live at this riverside site. We know from a study of the animal bones that this site was probably occupied in the winter. We also know that these people were traveling far and wide in search of raw materials. Many of the artifacts that were used by the people that lived here were made out of raw materials that were imported from western North Dakota. And either a trading network extended from western Minnesota into western North Dakota 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, or these people themselves moved back and forth over wide expanses of prairie and plains on foot to get the materials they needed for everyday living.
Since making the remarkable discoveries at Site 21 NR9, Mike McClovick and his archaeological team have moved on to other previously untouched sites in the Red River Valley. Finds from those areas indicate that this team is on the trail of a heretofore unknown tribe who occupied this land thousands of years ago. What began for the team as a summer's dig has now become a quest into the frontier of the past.
Archaeology is something that a person becomes involved with because they're committed to understanding the past. It's not something that a person does for money. It's not something that a person does for position, but it's something that a person does out of a feeling of vocation. A person decides to study archaeology because they like it, in the same way that an artist likes doing art, or an actor likes acting, or an athlete likes playing baseball or football. It's something that that's part of a person. It's not something that one approaches as a career option. Archaeology is something that carries with it tremendous personal rewards, and my own feeling is that archaeology is something that also provides people who happen to come in touch with what archaeologists do, with what archaeologists produce, provides these people with an appreciation of the past that they otherwise would never come to understand, and it provides all of us, I hope, with a more accurate perception of what went on in the past. And I think that we need accurate perceptions of the past, because we reconstruct what we are, and we come to believe that we are one thing or another, one type of people or another, on the basis of how we perceive what happened in our past. And if we have a biased or a jaundiced view of the past, we're going to have a biased view of ourselves and of our place among the peoples of the world. But if we accurately understand what happened in the world, and in this particular area, in the Red River Valley, we'll come to appreciate our tenure in this area. We'll come to better understand how the resources of this area are of value to us. We'll come to a deeper sense of respect for ourselves and for the land if we understand what happened in times gone by.